In my last video, I showed you how to use the VLOOKUP function, and we saw some limitations and workarounds. For example, VLOOKUP cannot look up data to the left of the lookup column. It can only look to the right direction of the lookup column. And one of the workarounds to this problem that I showed you in my previous video was to use a helper column or to use the choose function inside the VLOOKUP function. But for today's video, I'll show you another solution which is even more powerful and flexible than the VLOOKUP function, with all its workarounds. That better solution is to use the combination of two other functions, the index function and the match function. When we combine both these functions together, we can do very powerful lookups on all our data. So my plan for this video is that I'll start first by explaining how to use the match function on its own. Then I'll explain how to use the index function all by itself. And then I'll continue and show you how to combine both these functions for very powerful and flexible lookup scenarios. So without further ado, let's start out first by understanding what the match function is and what it does. Well, the match function simply returns the position number of a cell that is in a cell range, and we call the cell range an array. So for example, if I highlight the data in the hobbies column, then this group of cells is my array. And the position numbering starts from the top of this array. So the cell that has soccer would be in position number 1. Then tennis is in cell position number 2. Hockey is in cell position number 3, and so on and so on. Now notice that the position number is relative to my array. For example, if I only choose, say, these 4 cells to be my array, then this would be position number 1, and this would be position number 2, and so on. So let's take a look at the match function in action. I'll click on the cell where I want to display my result, and start with an equal sign followed by the word match. I'll hit tab on my keyboard so I can enter into this function. Now I see that the match function takes 3 arguments, a lookup value, a lookup array, and an optional third argument for the match type. So let's say I want to find the position number for jogging in the hobby column. Well, just by looking at it with my own eyes, we can tell that jogging is in position number 5 from the top, correct? Well, let's see how we can use the match function to tell us exactly that. So in my lookup value argument, I'll choose jogging from my already created hobby pull-down list, followed by a comma, and for my lookup array, I need to highlight the cell range, or my array. That holds these values, which is the hobby column. Then for my match type, I will choose exact match because that's what I want, an exact match of the value that I want to look up. Now, I close the formula by either typing a close parentheses, or I can press tab on my keyboard and then hit enter, and as expected, we get the result of 5 because jogging is the 5th item in our column. Now, since I base my lookup on a pull-down list, if I change my jogging hobby to, say, tennis, then the match result will automatically change to 2 because tennis is the 2nd item in my lookup array. So this was a simple example of how match works when we select cells in a vertical stack, but it also works with cells in a horizontal stack. For example, let's say we want to know what position number the age column header is in. I would start again with an equal sign, then I type match, then hit tab on my keyboard to enter into the function, and for my lookup value, I'll use the pull-down list I created already over here. Then type comma to move to the next argument. Then for the lookup array, I'll just highlight these cells only since that's where the lookup value I just chose is found in my table. Then I'll type a comma, and for my match type, I want exact match. Then I hit tab, and then I hit enter. The returned answer is a 2 because hobby is my 2nd cell in my cell array. And just like in a vertical stack where we start to count from the top, In a horizontal stack, we start to count from the left. So ID would be column number 1, and hobby would be column number 2, and so on and so on. So now if I change my lookup value to say age, then my result will change to position number 3. And if you have any questions, or you're not sure about something that I covered so far in this video, please leave me a comment down below and I'll be more than happy to reply back as soon as possible. Okay, let's move on now to the index function. And just like the match function, I'll explain how it works by itself first, then I'll tie in the match function with the index function together. And it's my goal that by the end of this video, you'll see how powerful, truly powerful, these two functions can be together looking up anything in our table. So the index function returns the actual cell value that is at the cross-section of a row and a column. And this is different than match because if you remember from a few moments ago, the match function returns just the cell position number. Well, let's look at some examples of the index function so you can get a better understanding of what I'm talking about. I'll type an equal sign followed by the word index, then hit tab on my keyboard, and now I see that the index function takes 3 arguments. The first argument is the array, and that is the cell range that will contain my answer. And this array can be a single column or a group of columns. So if I know that I want to return a value from the age column, then I would highlight that column only as my array. And if I'm not sure if I will be returning data from which column, then I can simply highlight the entire table as well. So that's basically what an array is in the index function. And for now, I'll just highlight the age column for this first example. Then I type comma, and now it wants a row number. Now the manual way, and just for demonstration purposes here, I'll type the number 2, which should return the value 15, since that's the second row in my age column. Then I type a comma, and for my column number, which is an optional argument because it has brackets around it, I can leave it blank. Why? Because I only have one column to work with. Later, I'll show you another example where we will use this column argument, but for now, let's wrap up this formula by hitting enter, and now I do see the value of the second cell of my chosen array, and it's correctly 15. Now let me show you an example of an index function that uses both the row and column arguments. Like I said before, this would be needed when we have more than one column in our array. So say I want to look up different types of data from my table. Like for example, at times I want to return the age, and in another lookup I want to return the hobby. So in this case, I'll make my array argument in my index function the entire table, just to be safe. So here's an example. I'll type equal sign, followed by the word index, then tab on my keyboard, then on my array, I'll just highlight all the data in my table. So now I can return any cell value really, and I specify which cell to return by the cross-section of the row and the column. So I'll type a comma, and for my row number, I'll randomly just type a 3, then a comma, then I'll randomly type a 4 for my column number. Now before I hit enter, let's examine this formula and let's guess what it will return. So far, I know that my answer must be a value from this table because that's what I chose to be my array in the index formula. Then the cell that is returned is the one that is 3 rows down from the top and 4 columns from the left. So here is my array, and now I go down to the 3rd row in my array, and notice it's the 3rd row down in my array, not 3rd row down in my entire Excel sheet. So I start from here as my first row, and then this would be my 2nd row, then this would be my 3rd row. Then I need to move 4 columns from the left, which would land me on this cell. So once I hit enter, I should get a 70 as my answer. And ta-da! That's what I get. Now if I go back to my index formula and modify my row and column values, the result will change based on this information. For example, I'll change my row number to 4 and my column number to 1. And when I hit enter, I get 1004 because that's the cell value that is 4 rows down in the first column. Now if we examine the index formula one more time, we realize that the second and third arguments are cell position numbers, right? And if you still recall from a few minutes ago, that's what the match function does. It returns a cell position number. So can you guess where I'm going with this? It simply makes sense to replace these hard-coded cell position numbers with match functions to make it more dynamic and more powerful. Let me show you some examples. In this lookup section, I want to be able to return the age, the hobby, and the height of any user that I pick from my pull-down lists. The first function will be to look up just one criteria, which is the age in this first example. So here's how to write our first formula that combines both the index and match functions to look up the age of a person. I start with an equal sign, then I type index, I hit tab, and since I know I'm only looking up an age of a person, then I just need to highlight the age column for my array. Then for the row number, instead of hard coding a number, I'll use a match function like this. I type match, I hit tab on my keyboard, then for my lookup value, I'll choose this pull down list so I can modify the name later. Then I type comma, and for my lookup array, since it's a name value, I need to highlight the name cells. Then I type a comma, and type 0 for the exact match. Now I have to close my match function with a closing parentheses. And then I also have to close my index function with another parenthesis, since we're using a function inside another function. And now when I hit enter, I get the correct age for Harold. And now let's see the magic come to life. If now I choose another name for my pull-down list, the age will change accordingly. Let's try Frank. And now you see that his age is correctly displayed at 20. If I change it to Stewie, I now get 30. So as you can see, I've built a very powerful lookup function when I mixed index with match. And one thing to note here is that I'm looking to the left of the lookup array. For example, I use the name, which is my last column, and return the age, which is a column to the left of the name column. This was not possible with VLOOKUP function. And to prove it, let's try a quick example. I'll type equal sign, then VLOOKUP, then I hit tab, then for my lookup value, I'll choose the name pull-down list here, then comma, and for my table array, I'm supposed to choose these columns that have my lookup column and my result column. So I'll just highlight these since I want to return the age. Then I'll type comma to move to my next argument, and for the column number, I'll type the column number that holds my answer, which in this case is the first column in my array. Then I type a comma, and I choose false for an exact match. And I hit enter. And as expected, due to the limitation of VLOOKUP, we get an error because we can't do this for two reasons. The first reason, the lookup column needs to be the leftmost column, which is not the case here. Our lookup column, which is the name, is the rightmost column. And the second reason why the VLOOKUP will not work here is because the result column, which is the age column, is to the left of the name column. So that's why, again, VLOOKUP is not possible in all situations, but index and match can certainly work. Now here, I showed you one example of the index match function to look up the age of a person. Let's just do one more example to help the idea stick in your mind and give you more practice. So I'll come here, type equal sign, then the word index, then tab, then for my array, which is the cell range that will hold my answer, I'll choose the hobby column, then comma. Then for my row number, I'll start a match function like this. And for my lookup value, I will choose my name pull-down list, then comma, and for my lookup array, I need to choose the cell range that has the lookup value, which is my name column. Then a comma, and for my match type, I'll choose exact match. Then I'll close my match function with a close parentheses, then another close parentheses to close the index match. Then I hit enter, and boom, I get the correct hobby for the name I chose in the pull-down list. If I change the name, you will see that the hobby will be updated as well. Now, I don't know if you noticed or not, but for both these two index match functions examples, I didn't use the optional column argument. Let's review this again. So as you can see here, I only entered a row number, and I left the optional column number blank. That's because I only had one lookup criteria, which meant I only had one column to look into. So if I type the number 1 in my column number position, it will still return the same answer. Again, that's because I only had one column and one lookup criteria. And that is what is called a one-way lookup. Now, let's go ahead and do the ultimate example to show how we can use index and match functions to look up two criteria. And because of the two criteria, I will need to specify the row number and column number. Take a look at this section in our Excel sheet. My first lookup criteria is the name, and my second criteria is any column you wish to choose. Both criteria are pull-down lists. The name list shows all the names, and the second pull-down list has the column names, so you can choose which criteria you want to include in your lookup. Alright, so let's see this all in action now. I'll type an equal sign, then index, then I hit tab on my keyboard. Now here's something new, or actually different than what we've tried so far with the previous examples. For my array, I really don't know what data will be returned because I simply want to return different data each time. I mean, sometimes I want to return the person's age, or ID, or hobby, or height. So then for my array, I'll have to highlight all the columns that might include my answer. Then I'll type a comma. For my row number, I'll do a match function like before. And for my lookup value, I'll choose this name pull-down list as my first lookup criteria. Then I'll type a comma. Then for my lookup array, I'll choose the name column in my table. Then I'll type a comma, and I'll choose 0 for my match type. Then I'll close the match function. And now since I want to include the optional column number, because I want to have two lookups, then I'll continue and I'll type a comma, followed by another match function. So just like I did a match function for the row number in a one-way lookup, I'll now do a second match function for my two-way lookup. I'll type match, and for my lookup value, I'll type H19, since that's the cell that has my pull-down list, but it's sitting behind this formula that I'm typing right now. Then I'll type a comma, and for my lookup array, I'll highlight these values since these are what contain the column headers. Then I type a comma, and for my match type, I will do a 0, then close my match function with a parentheses, and then close my index function with another close parentheses, and then I hit enter. So what I just built here is a dynamic lookup for all my data. I can choose any name for my name pull-down list, then I can choose either ID, or hobby, or age, or height, and I'll find my answer right away. For example, I can choose Frank, and choose ID, and now I see Frank's ID. I can then change ID to height, and now I just looked up Frank's height. I can leave height as is and change the name Frank to say Jennifer. And look, I now see Jennifer's height. So again, with index match, I can use two criteria to allow me to look up data based on the row and column. And as you saw, I didn't have to use the helper column, and I was able to look in both the right and left directions. So basically, the index and match functions together are much better than the VLOOKUP function. Now, my advice for you to master these two functions is to simply open up Excel and start playing around with these two functions. I would suggest you create a small table like this one and just start experimenting with each function on its own at first, then combining the index function with the match function for just one criteria. Then when you're comfortable at this point, please take it to the next level and add a second criteria for the column number using a second match function inside the index function. And basically, like anything new at first, it might be confusing or it might not work right away. So please come back to this video, watch it again, or watch different parts, and I'm sure you will figure it out. And please don't hesitate to contact me by leaving your comments or questions below, and I'll gladly reply to them as soon as possible. Please remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and press the bell icon. There are also more Excel videos in this playlist here, so please be sure to check them out. And as always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll be seeing you in another video.